Welcome to Downtown Sports. My name is Downtown Stephen Brown, and in today's video, we're going to talk about something that Bob McKenzie said on last night's broadcast, and also on the radio waves yesterday, brought to us by James, or Account for Hockey on Twitter, who tweets out a lot of radio quotes. Bob McKenzie on TSN 1050. I believe the Leafs are actively looking for a right-handed defenseman or a left-handed defenseman who could play the right with multiple years of term left. At least 1+ year, but would prefer 2+ years remaining. No guarantee it gets done, but they're looking. Kapanen, Johnsson, Kerfoot are who teams want. So I'm not going to be doing a deep analytical dive on all the players that I'm going to be talking about in this video, but what I am going to be doing is I have about half a dozen players or so picked out that fit Bob McKenzie's description of what the Maple Leafs are looking for. So first up on the list is Sean Walker of the LA Kings. Now Sean Walker is a 25-year-old right-handed shooting defenseman who's going to be an RFA at the end of this year, so that's a guy that would give the Maple Leafs the multiple years of control that they're looking for. And if we scroll down to his point totals here, he's having himself a decent little year this year, had an okay season last year, and the reason why I'm including him in this list is because, again, he's already 25 years old. The LA Kings are a struggling team, and who knows if he really fits their window of contention when they plan to compete again. Next up on the list is Jeff Petrie of the Montreal Canadiens. Now, definitely one of the more pricey players on this list in terms of just cap hit, and he's 32 years old, so he's a little bit of an older player, and it's always a little bit hairy when you're trading with a divisional rival, but he only has a year and a half left on his contract here, and Jeff Petrie's just a guy, no matter where he goes, he just seems to produce. 29 points in 51 games this year, 46 the year before, 42 the year before that. But the one thing that I would note, because he is 32 years old, you don't really know when that drop-off is coming. I don't know if I would include one of Kerfoot, Kapanen, or Johnsson to acquire this player. PK Subban. Now, PK Subban's probably the most controversial player that I do have on this list, just because of how much his plays dropped off in the last year or so, and that $9 million cap hit. If this is a trade that we're to go through at all, and especially today, it would start with them taking Cody Ceci and retaining 40 to 50% on PK Subban's contract, which has 2 years left on it after this one. Now, he had a really brutal start to this season, so I'm not going to show his stats because they're not that great, but I think he's picked it up a little bit as of late, and I don't know, PK Subban's just a player to me who I always thought needed to play in a big market to really thrive off of that energy. Didn't really get that in Nashville, although it is chaotic there sometimes. Definitely is not getting that in New Jersey. Got it in Montreal, would definitely get it in Toronto. But I think in Toronto, he would get that as more of a supporting role because he's not that main guy there, even though he is the polarizing figure that he is. But I don't know, you can't tell me that you don't get goosebumps thinking about PK Subban playing on the Toronto Maple Leafs in those big money moments in the playoffs. And just a side note, I do believe that the Devils ownership group really likes him on the team because he's a sellable, marketable face in an otherwise small market. Another New Jersey Devils defenseman on this list, this time 25-year-old right-handed shooting defenseman Damon Severson. Now, Damon Severson has multiple years of control on his deal at a very team-friendly number, so it would take a lot to pry him away from the Devils. Probably one of those three players that I mentioned beforehand, plus two other assets probably, but he's just a guy. He puts up a stable amount of points, can log bigger minutes for you on the blue line, and when the Leafs were shopping Nazem Kadri in the offseason, he was the guy that I had my eyes on. Matt Dumba of the Minnesota Wild, and this one feels a little bit more real because his name is actively out there in trade rumors. He's a 25-year-old right-handed shooting defenseman that was drafted in the same year as Morgan Riley and has roots back to the WHL, so there might be some type of pre-existing relationship there. But as you're going to see later on in this video, this $6 million number is going to be very hard to fit under the Maple Leafs' cap situation. Even this year and especially next year, this trade would have to include Cody Ceci in it right now this season. But he's got a lot of years of control, and for the $6 million, I mean, it's relatively reasonable when you're thinking of his kind of skill set. I mean, he is a defenseman who put up 50 points in a season just a couple of years ago, but he has had some injury problems as well, so that's why the Minnesota Wild are shopping him. They're also not that great of a team. But Matt Dumba of the Minnesota Wild is a very real possibility. You're probably looking at a Kapanen, Johnsson, or Kerfoot plus a CC plus a little bit of a sweetener in there. Josh Manson of the Anaheim Ducks. Now, every single time the Leafs play the Ducks, his name always pops up in hypothetical trades among Leafs Twitter, and people are always drooling over him because he's a really big body that lays a lot of hits. $4.1 million for a right-handed defenseman of his caliber. 28 years old with multiple years of control left after this season. I mean, I don't really know what this player would cost to pry away from the Ducks, but they are a team that's looking to rebuild, and with him being 28 years old, you definitely think that he's one of those players that they would look at moving out. But the asking price for him is probably going to be pretty high. You'd have to include one of Johnsson and Kapanen or Kerfoot plus 2 more assets, probably a prospect and a pick. Now, this is probably going to be the ideal lineup that the Toronto Maple Leafs could run out there for Game 1, Round 1 of the playoffs. I don't really want to include Mikheyev on it because I don't really know the timetable on it, just to be safe. Don't worry about the minus number at the top. It's because we have Cody Ceci in the scratches and 2 other players there. But without really kind of rehashing the entire video that I did a couple of days ago, for me, in my mind, the Maple Leafs have already started the clock on Rasmus Sandin's entry-level deal. So to acquire a player that would then take minutes away from him doesn't really make much sense to me. You've burned the year of his deal. Use him. Otherwise, you're giving up assets to acquire said player, and you're also wasting the year of that entry-level deal. Now, this might be a little bit galaxy brainy for folks out there, but I'm going to say it anyway because it's a fun idea, and this channel is for fun. But Tyson Barrie's a defenseman that's been really pissing people off this year. 1, for his defensive lapses, and 2, because he keeps shooting it into other players' shin pad. But what I would propose is a 3-team deal involving Tyson Barrie. Now, what this would allow is for the Maple Leafs to acquire a defenseman to play in their top 4 with term left on their contracts and not have to take minutes away from Rasmus Sandin. And also, not to mention, it would soften the acquisition cost of that said defenseman, and it's also just good asset management, right? You're getting something for someone who otherwise would have just walked away in free agency. Now, might be a little bit galaxy brainy, just something interesting. So let me explain some of the stuff that's on the screen right now. This would be for next year if the Toronto Maple Leafs acquired a defenseman at the draft or in the offseason. This is what their salary cap situation would look like if they re-signed Jake Muzzin and then traded one of Kasperi Kapanen, Andreas Johnsson, and Alexander Kerfoot. Joseph Woll is just a placeholder here, and so is Guy at League Min next season. Now, this is the scope of things before that said hypothetical defenseman would be added to the roster. Now, you're going to look at the $4.18 million in cap space, and that's the cap space that you have to add that player to the roster. And things are tight. I mean, I was pretty conservative with the increase that I gave to the salary cap at about 2.5%. I lowered my offer that I did in the previous video to Jake Muzzin by $500,000. I lowered the offer that I gave to Travis Dermott by $500,000, but I slashed a year instead of 3. It's 2 years now. So, I mean, things are tight. And, I mean, you're not really upgrading the goaltending position. When I look at this, you have that $4.128 million number. I would much rather just roll with this decor and inject Kasperi Kapanen, Andreas Johnsson, or Kerfoot into this lineup. Because when you're looking at something like this, and this is a very real possibility for next season, I mean, when you look at the decor, I mean, it's really not that bad on paper, especially when you consider that there's another year of development for a lot of these younger players. But then you take a look at the forward core, and you're seeing some redundancies in some players here. I mean, Ilya Mikheyev and Trevor Moore on the 4th line. I mean, those aren't really 4th-line players, but it's a nice luxury to have because it fits under the salary cap, which, by the way, $1.2 million is definitely enough to go out there and sign yourself one of those more premium backup goalies that would be on the market. I understand why some people want to make a trade, and I understand the magnitude of the resources that it would take to make the trade that everyone wants the team to make. But when you look back at what I just showed you, there's nothing really too sexy about this, but sometimes the unsexy option, the simplest option, is the right option. So, I don't really know. I'm torn between it. I don't really know if making a trade is necessary. I don't really like the idea of giving up cost-controlled young forwards that have a little bit of room to grow. I mean, of the three, I would much prefer to give up Andreas Janssen or Alexander Kerfoot opposed to Kasperi Kapanen. I think that Kapanen has more of a unique skill set than the other two. But let me know down in the comment section what you guys think, and leave me a like on the video because it does help out the channel a lot. And subscribe for more because more is always on the way. And guys, remember, regardless of all this trade stuff, the Toronto Maple Leafs are making the playoffs this year.